Hello, everyone, and it's another Premier Pundits podcast. It's Friday night. We're ahead of the double game week 26. We've already covered the boring defensive assets. So tonight, Mr. McKenna, my esteemed co-host, and I are going to have a look through those attacking options over the coming 7 to 8 days. Mr. McKenna, you're back. We're back. It hasn't been very long since I've seen you, but how the devil are you?
I'm doing good, Ben. I'm looking forward to this weekend. It's a double game week in terms of FPL, so you got to be a little bit excited, don't you? We've made some fan team videos. I'm looking forward to taking part in that. But going back to the roots today, aren't we, of talking about FPL and attacking assets. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to with this double game week 26, but also we're going to give advice to not catch people out. And I've done a bit of number crunching as well, especially looking at that Leicester front line, because we talked yesterday about the possible injury of Maddison. So I have done the investigations of Leicester this season with and without Mr. Maddison. But I think one of the things that I have to start off the show with, and we'll kind of confirm captains later, obviously yours is always Mr. Rashford himself. I don't know if you'll be triple captaining him, but I'm very tempted with triple captaining this game week, but I also do like game week 27 where Manchester City play Man United and Southampton. That one looks a little bit more enticing for me, but maybe we'll start off with the captaincy choices then, Ben. What are you looking at? Which teams or which kind of fixtures do you think will give the biggest bang for your buck, and is it a good game week for others, maybe not yourself, for the triple captaincy to be pulled?
Look, if the community is to be believed, and if I take my insights from my timeline, then it seems as all and sundry are lumping on Harry Kane. He seems to be the go-to guy in this game week, and depending on your strategy, how you want to play the game, you either go with the flow, and hope that he bangs. And if he doesn't, it may not harm your overall rank. Or you take that punt and you swim against the tide, and you maybe look to the likes of, we say this week in and week out, what an absolute beast Bruno is. He keeps on churning out those points. And for me, it's Bruno or it's somebody like a Salah. And, we alluded it to yesterday. There's a lot going on at Liverpool, and we touched upon, the Alisson Becker, his father passing, and Liverpool may want to put on a performance, and dedication to him to celebrate his life. But they've also been boosted by the return of potentially Fabinho. I don't think he would come back into the line, but Diego Jota is well placed. He has done a little bit more training with the squad, and just having those sheer numbers available, and able to boost the squad. Look, they're going to be wanting to answer a lot of critics following that Merseyside derby loss. So for me, if it wasn't Rashford and I did own somebody like Salah, I wouldn't go Kane for the sheer reason that he's just not a differential. Like I say, there's going to be far too many people onto him, and I would take the chance that Tottenham haven't been great, so I'll take the chance that he doesn't bang. So those would be the three main or the obvious ones. I have heard people going for a triple captain Edison, which would be very differential.
I like it. I mean, especially if he's on penalties like we've been kind of hoping and scheming over the last few game weeks. I mean, the other kind of captaincy choices, and it's an interesting one that we're opening up with this because I'm going to offer analysis for my thoughts and feelings. Harry Kane, I really don't like, and we kind of talked about the defences. I think Fulham could do well. Dominic Calvert-Lewin is another one that a lot of people are sweet on, and I think you're going to be stuck with the Toffees. They're not doing great over the last few game weeks. The data isn't there. Calvert-Lewin, I do understand, kind of almost transcends fixtures and results with Everton. He kind of nicks a goal almost every week, it seemingly is. So he might be okay, but I wouldn't waste a triple captaincy on him because when I'm using my captaincy and triple captaincy, I'm looking at form plus fixtures, an individual that is in a high quality squad doing very well. I don't like to take punts. You don't waste the captaincy on a punt. Another kind of group of individuals that people are looking at, maybe Aston Villa, not for captaincy, but just kind of facilitating their teams, bringing them in, but I'm not too keen on them. So there's quite a few controversial discussion points that we're going to go into. For me, I think the clear pick is a Manchester City player. The teams that they're playing against is obviously West Ham and Wolves, but this is a Man City team that destroys anybody and everybody on their day. Highest for kind of shots in the box, shots, XG over the last few game weeks. They're the in-form team, brilliant defence, and that allows the players going forward. For me, it's Sterling or Gundogan, and Sterling has bit me in the arse so many times, but I would give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't think I'll triple captain him this week because I don't think the fixtures are as good as next week's ones. But yeah, for a double game week, Manchester City are my kind of picks for it. And just let's go through some of the data and the numbers for the reasons behind my choices then. So Gundogan, most XGI of any player in the last 6 game weeks, and more goals than any other of the Manchester City assets. But then you look at Sterling, and he has the most XG of any player in the Premier League over the last 6 game weeks, and a lot of shots in the box, more than Gundogan or any other Manchester City asset. But I think the interesting one, and a differential one for you, Mr. Differential Dinnery, is Mr. Kevin De Bruyne. Rarely dropped, but there is this thing that he's coming back from injury. Maybe he'll have managed minutes. A lot of people are kind of looking at him as a differential pick, but he is the second best XGI amongst midfielders in the Premier League this season per 90 minutes played. What do you think about those 3 as captaincy picks, or just picks this game week? Because I think let's throw out the discussion point of who you, if you should have them in, you should have 3 Manchester City assets this week. It's which ones do you like? So Gundo, Sterling, KDB, or would you go with maybe KDB, Sterling, Gundo plus 2 defenders?
As is always the problem with Manchester City and Pep Guardiola, is this squad rotation and managing those players. We would assume that KDB is in line for a start after, being just named on the bench midweek and playing no minutes. Sterling returned 5, I think it's 4 of the last 5 game weeks, or maybe 5 out of the last 6. Great form, but again, I have question marks. Because there's so much quality and strength and depth in that City squad, we only have Nathan Ake, who isn't quite up to speed. And within that, even the last few game weeks, we've seen, even though we've had Gabriel Jesus fully fit, we've had Sergio Aguero on, the peripherals of the squad coming back from injury, and Pep's went with Phil Foden as a false 9. He's went with Bernardo Silva as a false 9. Now, you bring one of those strikers back in, and if you want to keep Bernardo in, it's then who do you drop? So that's always my concern. And if I'm buying premium, I want them to play. And we're talking about back-to-back double game weeks. So the likelihood is that within that nucleus of players that we'd be, attracted to, it would be reasonable to assume that we're looking at three out of 4 games for those players. As Pep's already talked about managing his squad for the remainder of the season. So for me, I'm already sitting on Diaz and Cancelo. That's a worry. And if I was to go triple City, I think I'll be focusing on the back line. If the truth be known, I just can't. I think there are good options elsewhere, cheaper options that will allow me to invest in other areas of the pitch. And I prefer the starts and I prefer the minutes in a safer, sounder strategy than maybe those riskier punts. If you could guess City and if you could nail down those starters, then great. But it just can't. And maybe Gundo, maybe at his price, he's worth it. What is he, 6.1 million into that City team? You know, he's the one gamble or risk that I would be prepared to take higher up the pitch.
Looking at the minutes, though, it's not like Sterling has had his minutes managed through this season. I think he's only had 4 games where he's not started. And since game week 22, it's been 90, 90, 90, 79, 90. And as you said there, he's been involved in a fair few points and goals and assists since then. I believe there's not too much risk with Raheem Sterling, or can you correct me on that? Maybe do I have too much belief in his ability to start? Because I felt like he was used very much even over the hectic Christmas period.
I mean, Pep's come out and he said, look, he can play every single day. He's just a fit player. He's athletic. You know, when he has been out injured, he returns to play quickly, returns performance quite quickly. He's got good powers of regeneration. I just feel as if, and yeah, look, you're trying to read between the lines and you're trying to second guess. The fact that he has played so many minutes leads me to believe that, well, then maybe he is due a little bit of time off. And that would be, you know, at the reluctance of the player dropping out of that squad, because if you ask anybody, any footballer, elite level, you know, they will want to be out there on the pitch. So, yeah, it's just, I just don't want to take that risk. I just, you know, even though the stats and the data may tell us that, you know, he's more or less knocked in, I just don't want to be the guy that spends the money on, you know, that player and for him to either not start or have limited game time.
So let's move it on to another team that we're quite attracted to. You've said there that Gundo is kind of your pick. Sterling is still mine, partly kind of shaped by the fact that he is in my team, and I do have the captaincy armband on him for this game week. So let's turn attentions to Leicester, because there's a big discussion point here, a legitimate question which you posed to me, and I thought I'm going to go out here and do a bit of homework to bring it onto the show today. Maddison, is he injured? What's the latest update there, Ben, before I kind of throw these stats out?
So, yeah, he is injured, first and foremost. Do we have a definitive timeline on a potential return? No, we don't. As very similar to the Jack Grealish scenario, these decisions are going to be player-led. And by that, it's about pain management. He's been down, he's seen a specialist. We know that there's a problem with a tendon in the hip. And they're waiting for that issue to, till it dies down. It's flared up. The rest and recovery will help ease that pain. How long that takes, you know, nobody can. There's nothing definitive on that. So, I would suggest at least this double game week before, you know, maybe it's game week 27, 28 before we see Maddison back. Hopefully it's not long term, but of course, like I say, that there's nothing to say that it has settled down, and as soon as he starts to be reintegrated into training, it could flare up again. So it's one to watch. But yeah, certainly for this, the next couple of games, we're not expecting James Maddison to be in that Foxes squad.
So the interesting thing for me is that I like Leicester. I think that they were doing really well, coming into a good vein of form. I like their defensive assets. Somebody like Pereira, I think is kind of a great shout because also he's out of position. But I like the forward line of Leicester as well, especially Barnes. I think Vardy might be an interesting one. I would even dare to say that Vardy might be a better pick than Kane this game week. But that is kind of by the by, because at the moment, I'm now a little bit worried looking at the data. So at the start of the season, game weeks 1 to 8, Maddison was not in the team. He was in and out, sporadic, because, as you mentioned there, before the season started, he had this operation and then he was recovering. So looking at that data without Maddison in the team, Leicester had 5 chances created per game, second worst in the Premier League, 5.78 shots inside the box, 12th in the Premier League, 0.81 XG non-penalty per game, which was the total XG was actually inflated by penalties, and a huge overperformance in 2 goals scored per game in that period, and then 0.89 big chances created. Then you look at game week 9 onwards, with Maddison more into the squad, And from 5 chances created per game, you then go to 9.9 chances created per game, 8th best in the Premier League. You go from 5.78 shots in the box to 7.81 to 10th best in the Premier League. You go from 0.81 XG non-penalty per game to 1.31. You go from a 0.89 to 1.31 big chances created per game. And their 1.5 goals per game is obviously less. There's a bit of regression, but it's only slight overperformance on their XG, 10% more, which is sustainable in kind of XG models for an elite team. And that's 5th best in the Premier League for goals per game since game week 9. So looking at that, I do now have legitimate worries about having Barnes, Vardy and other kind of forward players in the Leicester team. Depending on how long he's out for, this could have a larger impact than I initially estimated. Kind of looking at that data there, Ben, does that put you off kind of encouraging people to go for Barnes and Vardy?
Yeah, I think we touched upon this in the defensive assets podcast. I've had concerns anyway with regards to Leicester and the quick turnarounds between European fixtures. We're expecting Brendan Rodgers to more or less have the same squad at his disposal what he had on Thursday night, and that squad looked pretty toothless. You know, it looked a little bit lackluster. Even when they went a goal down, you expect, a big fight back, some of those big players to stand up and really, take on responsibility, and it didn't happen. Yes, Brendan Rodgers had made a couple of changes, but, the main core, the main nucleus of that team, is from the Premier League. If you look at the data, I was drawn to Jamie Vardy. I think he scored in 6 of 7 games against teams in the top 6, and I think he has something like 8 goals in 7 games, maybe against Arsenal. So his record is second to none, and can you convince yourself that Jamie Vardy can transcend the form and fixtures and deliver as we always know he can? But I'm just not convinced. Like I say, I think for me, the likes of the Harvey Barnes of this world and everybody else, everybody within that team benefit from James Maddison's presence on that pitch because, he is the high status, high profile star man. He will always attract the attention because if you don't, he will punish you. And whether that's pulling players out of position, whether that's creating a little bit of space elsewhere, whether that's taking the focus off defenders, he's always got, the opposition on the back foot. And without him, Leicester are just a little bit maybe predictable in their play. And like I said, just losing, one of those key assets is a concern. And you can even throw in maybe Ayoze Perez into that. I know he hasn't been great, but he's an option who Brendan Rodgers can throw on. We've seen last week with Ricardo Pereira being pushed up there on the right-hand side of the wing. I don't think that was an ideal option. Pereira hasn't been the player that we've seen pre-injury. That would have been a good opportunity for Perez to unlock the door. So Brendan Rodgers is limited with, the players that he has at his disposal. And, that result for Arsenal in the Europa League, the manner of that victory, that's a good confidence boost. That's a shot in the arm for Mikel Arteta and his men. So I think it's a difficult game. I really do. And I'll be staying away from Leicester. Just too much of a risky punt, given that the players that they've currently got sidelined.
It worries me a little bit more now because obviously I've touted Harvey Barnes for my fan team as well, and I do have Harvey Barnes in my fantasy Premier League team as well. So I'm hoping that my data kind of gathering is wrong and that I'm not right in that sense, and hopefully Barnes can kind of go above and beyond that. Just one final question on Leicester though. They are now out of Europe. That will remove some of the worries there. Do you think that will help the squad then, especially if Maddison does have an injury? This could mean that he's kind of brought back in, phased in, and not going to have long-term problems.
Europa League, yes, we're at the knockout stages, but we're still not playing at a level of the Premier League. So in a way, that European competition is a good way of blooding those players back and reintegrating them and giving them minutes. So without that, then you're focusing, and without maybe any being able to play bounce games behind closed doors matches, then you're heavily reliant on just throwing players back on in the Premier League. Not a big issue if Maddison is only out short term. However, on the flip side, what it allows Brendan Rodgers to do is get some much needed time on the training pitches. In the current climate, when all of these games are coming thick and fast, it's about post-match recovery and then pre-match build-up. There's very little that goes on in that training ground in terms of tactics, and maybe he's working on a few tweaks or maybe formational tweaks or issues that have been going on that they just haven't been able to address. So that will allow, Brendan Rodgers to do some real coaching and get to work with those guys again. So they will certainly benefit from that.
So let's continue the discussions. And one of the ones that I want to bring up, just because it came up in kind of the data that I was looking at, Mbaye Diagne of West Brom, you got a little wry smile on your face.
Did just for the record, did you Google how to pronounce his name?
No. So I don't know if I've butchered his name again. That's probably.
I actually thought you pulled that off there quite well.
Well, maybe I have. Maybe I've just got beginner's luck or something with Diagne, but. Yeah, I haven't actually Googled how to look up it. Sorry, Google how to pronounce his name, because that wasn't the kind of first thought in my mind when I was looking at the data. I was like, oh, that's an interesting data spike. I'm going to now learn how to pronounce the name. It didn't even come into my thinking, which I apologise to you, Mbaye. It's nothing personal. But in terms of it, he's looking all right in terms of XGI, but I think the interesting thing for me is people are kind of thinking, oh, he's scored loads of goals in the last few game weeks and he's looking fantastic. But for me, looking at the data of West Brom and looking at his own data, yes, he does have the kind of he's in the top 6 for XG and XGI of all players in the last 4 game weeks. But the first thing that I would say is West Brom have a very difficult fixture run kind of going towards the end of the season. And so even kind of factoring in that he's kind of been on a good form, you look at the Brighton and Everton kind of double up this game week. Maybe Everton is quite appealing. Brighton, on Fan Team, once again, I'm mentioning it, we actually have the debate, you and I, that I think Brighton will keep a clean sheet. Then it's Newcastle and Crystal Palace. They blank 29. But then there's Chelsea, Leicester, Villa, Wolves, Arsenal, Liverpool and West Ham all waiting for them between now and the end of the season. So I'm not sure if it's kind of a good idea to bring him in. And I'm not too kind of sold on how brilliant this double game week is for Mbaye Diagne as well. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and I've seen a few people kind of look towards him in the community, and he is exactly the kind of player that Big Sam loves, and he's doing the stuff that Big Sam loves as well. He's kind of causing problems for defences. He's that big man up there, and West Brom kind of suit the Allardyce style of play because they do have those quick players to kind of work around him as well, whilst he's creating spaces, or they create spaces for him. So he is a bit of a statistical anomaly, and I'm not sure what to do with this information apart from just present it to people and kind of contextualise it. Do what you will, but for me, I think it's a big risk with the fact that West Brom don't have amazing attacking data. They don't have good fixtures. It's maybe a punt too far, but you're the differential dinnery. You had Mateta in your team. I mean, Diagne must surely be more of a look-in than big man Mateta.
He's been in my team for about 4 or 5 weeks now. Surely you know this, Jason, already. He's been in since game week 22, I think, literally when he first joined. So I've been really pleased with him. He may have only had a 1 goal return, but unfortunate. I mean, his miss against Burnley where he hit the ball does really well to get in that position. I mean, it was yeah, it was a bad finish, and he should be putting that to bed.
Did you pull your hair out?
I haven't got much of it left. I'm trying to keep it in, not pull it out. But I think he's had goals disallowed for marginal offside calls against Tottenham. I think he hit the post against Manchester United. So he has been a little bit unfortunate, and I'm warming to West Brom. I know we've had this discussion before. I'm even contemplating, Diagne will stay in my team, and Maitland-Niles at the opposite end. I just think they look a little bit more solid in recent games, and we're getting to the point where I'm looking at those two games, Brighton and Everton. Brighton aren't prolific scorers, so Sam Allardyce may target that one to say, right, well, we've got to open the floodgates. We've got to give. I mean, they really could have battered Burnley last week with 10 men. Carry that form through, and I can see a comfortable win. Diagne hat-trick. I might even triple captain him. Who knows? I just rip it off Rashford.
I prefer that to even old Harry Kane, Diagne over over Harry Kane. That's an audacious move there. But yeah, just kind of opening the insights there, because you have been tweeting on him for a while, and there is interesting data there. And maybe West Brom are turning it round, but I don't know, I'm not sold on the Sam project just yet. But a team that are threatened with relegation that I do like the looks of, Fulham. Cottagers have attacking data over the last 6 game weeks that is comparable to European side. 6th best for shots in the box, 6th best for chances created, 5th best for non-penalty XG. Fixtures over the medium term are difficult, but there is that situation that obviously they've got a lot more to fight for than maybe those that they are playing. The suggestion for me from this situation here is, if you're wildcarding soon or maybe free hitting this week, it's kind of maybe a chance to exploit a couple of good games for Fulham. I think, they're playing Tottenham, and a lot of people are seeing it reverse wise that, this is a great one for Tottenham. But I look at Fulham and I think Tottenham are letting in goals at the moment. They're playing Crystal Palace as well, who have been bleeding goals. This could be a good one to own somebody like Lookman, like Marja. I think this is a good opportunity. And yes, as I said, they're difficult fixtures over the medium and longer term. They've got City and they've got Liverpool over the next, but they could nick a goal. I mean, Liverpool haven't been great. After that, they play Leeds, Villa, Wolves, Arsenal. These are teams that haven't been as good as they once were last season. Leeds obviously new to the Premier League as well, but they're letting in lots of goals. It's not a bad shout. And like I said there, if you're wildcarding soon or if you're going to play a chip or something, then you can kind of protect yourself a little bit if you were to just bring them in for this game week, for a punty kind of situation, especially if you're free hitting, then your team resets anyway. So I like Fulham. I think this is kind of a head-to-head that we have. I prefer Fulham if you're going to go for a relegation kind of threatened team over West Brom. What are your thoughts and feelings on the Cottagers, though?
Yeah, look, we're in agreement. Doesn't happen very often, Jason, but I'm in agreement. Yeah, I like Fulham. I like Lookman. I've been on Marja a couple of times in the last few weeks on different formats. I'm just waiting for, it all seems to be coming together. Loftus-Cheek now getting regular football, starting to look like the player, that we thought he could be at Chelsea before that injury. So, that's taken a little bit away for him. Decover Reed, so they just look solid. They keep it tight. They're not going to score lots and lots of goals, but, by keeping it tight and maybe nicking one or two, I think they've got a great chance of staying up. As a Newcastle supporter, that's a worry. And I think we're playing, if I'm quite right, I think we're playing at Craven Cottage on the last game of the season. So that could be absolutely huge. I mean, while they're in the ascendancy, we're obviously going the opposite way. So we need Steve Bruce to pull his finger out. But yeah, I mean, of the teams down there, certainly Scotty Parker's men are the form side, are they showing the most promising potential for, causing a bit of an upset and getting out of the dogfight.
I think I might be causing an upset here, kind of looking at the data of Everton now. So good fixtures over the next 6, but poor data. The side over the last 8 fixtures have been in the bottom 3 for attacking data, with first worst shots in the box, 5th lowest XG non-penalty, and bottom for chances created. Now, some people have said, oh, well, have a look at the last few game weeks, as in the last 4 game weeks, because they've had a good result against Liverpool. So I shortened the data sets, and again, it's not very pretty reading. There's not a lot to kind of like about the Toffees. As I said there, Calvert-Lewin may do all right, but I don't like the shouts of James Rodriguez and Richarlison at the moment. I just don't feel that, again, it's this kind of form plus fixture situation. Yes, the fixture's all right, but there's no kind of data to do that. And their price points, there's good assets at similar price points that do have form, do have good fixtures, and yeah, there's not a belief from me in their ability. I mean, you're kind of looking at Richarlison, but then you look at maybe an Antonio who is slightly cheaper, more in form. Yes, he's got more difficult fixtures, but the team data of West Ham are really good. They don't have a double, but I just kind of go with rather kind of punting with what I would take a punt on it is somebody that's maybe underperforming or kind of bubbling under the surface, but there's literally nothing for me to kind of buy into with Everton and go, yeah, you know what, there could be a positive there apart from the fixture swing. So, Ben, do you think that there's a bit too much focus on the fact that these on paper look like good fixtures, or maybe am I overlooking it? Because let's be honest, that these are fairly quite good fixtures in game week 26 double of Southampton and West Brom.
Yeah, but I think people are being suckered into that Merseyside derby win when the form book and everything else sort of goes out the window. Liverpool weren't great, and in the reality, Everton weren't that great either, although they came away with an excellent result at Anfield. For me, again, yeah, it's a risky punt. We need to see that level of consistency for Carlo Ancelotti's men. A lot of people asking about Calvert-Lewin. Hamstring injuries, notoriously difficult to manage. They have high re-injury recurrence rates, especially within our first 30 days. So again, my worry would be, would Ancelotti manage him in those 2 games? Will he start both? How many minutes will he play in both? If I was to go anybody, it would be Richarlison, but I'm only lukewarm on the Brazilian. I think he has got a lot more to offer, and I think he's probably playing some of maybe the best football that he has this season. But that's not really saying a lot, because by his own high standards, he's been fairly average, pretty much like a lot of that Everton team. And it comes down to how Ancelotti wants to set up his side. We have Alan, who is, again, being brought back into the squad. If you bring him in, does that mean there's going to be a formational tweak? I do like Seamus Coleman on the right-hand side, but he has been playing Holgate out there, and it could be somebody like Godfrey and Keane, centre-backs with Holgate there. So there's too much chopping and changing for me within that team, and I think that in itself almost has a domino effect on those forwards and attacking players, because it just takes the side, a little bit of, 20 minutes, half an hour, a half to get that bit of momentum, by which point, they could be a goal or 2 down. So I see the appeal from the outside looking in, but I would always, look at it with a little bit of caution and scratch beneath the surface, because they're a little bit of a polished turd.
Well, that's what toffee looks like, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, Everton is a polished turd. There you go.
Well, another team that I want to urge caution over is, I think people can hear my cat in the background again. She wants to join in with the discussions. I'll probably have to nip and sort her out in a second. It is in, go and give her a pet and just calm her down. But let's talk. Let's talk about Aston Villa, because they're a team that I want to urge caution over. Seems to be a good double game week for the team. The side have the second best fixtures over the next 6 game weeks, but I have worries over their downturn in data. Coupled with this is the fact that Grealish will be out for at least one game, maybe more. It's similar to the Maddison situation. The injury, you don't know how long it's going to impact him for, and this is kind of almost like Chilwell as well, that it's kind of a management situation with shin splints, as they call them. So in this double game week, he'll be missing one anyway, and the team dependence on him for chance creation is incredibly pronounced. Over 45% of positive ball progression towards goal comes from Grealish. He contributes 25% of direct attack/shot creations. So that's an incredible loss there. Watkins has kind of been constantly underperforming that XG data anyway, and now he'll have a lot of those chances kind of almost taken away. And the other thing for me is that for the first time since Project Restart, Aston Villa have had a sustained period of negative XG difference. They've not been really doing well in their attack. They've been letting too many chances through. Their kind of actual team attacking data is not great. It's worrying. It's bottom half of the stuff. You know, over the last 6 game weeks, 4.14 expected non-penalty XG. Not great in terms of shots inside the box, just 30. On par with Everton, who we've just criticised there. It doesn't seem sensible to me to load up on them for this double game week as well. And this kind of brings back to a point that I said yesterday is, on the face of it, yes, it's a double game week. When you drill down into the numbers, there's a sparing. It's not great. There's not a lot of on offer.
Look, I am well off Aston Villa at this moment in time. And in fact, questions I've had asked with regards to even players involved in the double game week versus single game week players for Leeds. I'm actually saying, you know what, take a punt on that Leeds side, because I fancy them to do a job on Villa. I'm fancying 2 or 3 goals there, and I'd be surprised. I'm not expecting Villa to get a win out of these double game weeks. So let's not sugarcoat it. I think, you know, without Martinez between the sticks in the last few games, Villa could have been on the receiving end of a couple of bad and heavy defeats. And I'm going to put it out there that I think they could lose back-to-back games in this double game week. I really do. I think Sheffield United could even get one over them at Bramall Lane. And like I say, Leeds. Wouldn't surprise me to see Leeds score at least 2 or 3.
This is another great point that I was actually going to come on to, linked with Aston Villa. People are kind of looking at it. They're going, oh, Villa are playing Leeds and they're playing Sheffield United. This is fantastic, and double up and maybe captain some of their assets. But then Grealish isn't there, who is probably the only player that I would captain in that team. Then looking at that poor kind of defensive data, I think you play Leeds over Villa assets this game week. You're 100% right there. Looking at it, Leeds are in good form, kind of scoring lots of goals. Yes, they let in lots of goals, and maybe Villa might nick a goal or two, but I think you're dead on the money there. Even without Phillips, Leeds are an incredible force. They're almost like something supernatural at times. They're fantastic, and I think Leeds are going to catch out Villa here. And Martinez can do a lot, but he won't be able to prevent everything from going in. And this could be where the kind of data catches up with Villa, because I think they've been treading water over the last few weeks, and this Grealish loss is kind of a huge moment. Could be like a Van Dijk moment for the Aston Villa side. So again, we have a weird agreement there, Ben, so a positive one on that. So the final point that I want to end on in terms of teams, but as always, Ben, you can kind of add a few more if you've got any kind of maybe differential dinnery shouts. But Tottenham, I'm giving an evaluation on them, and again, I think that I'm going to be in a minority of the community here, but I don't like those games. Burnley, Fulham. Burnley are great at kind of seeing out results. They're good at kind of defending and sitting deep and causing frustrations. And the last couple of game weeks have kind of said that, and people have messaged and said, oh, no, Burnley can't do this, can't do that. But they ebb and flow. Sean Dyche is really weird, and he just kind of, the team will underperform, let in lots of goals, and then they'll just suddenly become amazing at the back. And they're doing that at the moment. They're doing really good performances. They kind of saw that one through with West Brom. Huge angst and worry as a double up in my defence of Burnley last weekend. But they did the job. Never doubt the Burnley, or I should say something like that. But Tottenham are playing them based also on the fact that looking at the data over the last 6 game weeks, they sit 4th from bottom for XG non-penalty, 4th from bottom for shots inside the box, 2nd worst big chances created, and 14th for total chances created. At this time, the side are not looking like a good attacking side. I honestly can't see them scoring too many goals, and this kind of triple captaincy on Harry Kane, I think it is actually, quite frankly, a bit of a danger.
It's always a risk, yeah, and almost you don't want to get caught up by this wave of enthusiasm from the community, and sometimes you just have to filter everything out and remain true to yourself, because you almost, like I say, they convince you. You know, it's that polarizing opinion that Kane is going to go out, and you forget every rational thought, every statistic, every piece of data that tells you he shouldn't. And because everybody else, and then you almost just, well, do a plumb for him, because if he does bang, you know, I'm going to get left behind. So again, it comes down to your own particular strategy. You know, I'm with you. I did get drawn into the Harry Kane debate earlier in the week. In hindsight and on reflection, I won't be going anywhere near that. Again, I'm just not convinced. I think there are 2 tough games. You know what you're going to get with Sean Dyche's Burnley side. They're going to be hard to break down, solid 4-4-2. And we've already touched upon what Scott Parker's doing at Fulham. And I'm not going to say resurgence, but, you know, their little run of form, that's really put them in with a good chance of surviving. So, look, I think I certainly wouldn't be taking any hits. And I would think there's fires to fell elsewhere. So, you know, even if you had a free transfer, I think there are better options. So if you don't have them, don't go out your way to try and bring them in.
I think that is great advice there, Ben. And I hope that we've given great advice throughout the programme today. But just, I always urge people, remember to like, share and subscribe to the channel, because we're putting out from next week daily content that you can enjoy. We're going to be doing all sorts of interesting, fun, new kind of concepts. So we'll be getting your questions in. So content that is based around what you want to hear. But of course, we're continuing the usual series of Tactic Thursdays. And of course, Dr. Raj, the fantasy doctor, explaining to you, going behind the headlines and maybe why the newspaper's been a little bit naughty with some of the hyperbole that they go into. But yeah, I hope that you found this helpful. I hope that maybe we've broken down why double game week 26 is, I don't know, not up there as one of our kind of highlights for this season so far, Ben. And just wishing you the best of luck with your teams.
Echo those thoughts, Jason. Game week 26, it's the forbidden fruit, isn't it? It's a piece of fruit that we all want, but, you know, you take that bite and, I mean, who knows, you could be sleeping until the end of the season. So I think I'm talking myself out of a wild card again for the 2nd week running. I honestly have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm going to sleep on it, have a think. There will be some kind of chip activated. I'm just not sure which one it is. But for now, folks, I hope you enjoyed our Attacking Assets Premier Pundits pod. Don't forget to check out the defensive assets one that we posted yesterday if you haven't already done so, and all of the other great videos that are currently live. But for now, Ciao.